Dr. Lisa Moore couldn't take her eyes off the strange being that floated outside the ship's viewing window. The creature looked like it was made of pure ice, its body transparent and sparkling under the starlight. As the chief xenobiologist on the research vessel Stellar Pioneer, she had seen many alien species before, but nothing like this. "They're requesting permission to come aboard," said Peter Wright from his station at Communications. His voice was steady, but Lisa could hear a hint of worry in it. "They say they come in peace." Lisa walked closer to the window, studying the crystalline beings. There were 5 of them, each about 7 feet tall, their bodies giving off a soft blue glow. They moved through space without any visible propulsion system or protective suits. It was as if they were perfectly at home in the cold vacuum. "What do you think, Doctor?" Captain Steve Rogers asked, standing beside her. His weathered face reflected in the window, mixing with the image of the creatures outside. "I think this could be the most important first contact we've ever made," Lisa said, trying to keep her excitement under control. "Their biology must be incredible. They seem to be living crystals." The captain nodded slowly. "And you believe it's safe to let them aboard?" "We should follow first contact protocols," Lisa said. "Invite them into the quarantine bay first. My team can run initial scans from there." The captain gave the order, and the crew quickly prepared the quarantine bay. Lisa hurried to put on her protective suit, her heart beating faster with each step. The suit felt bulky and uncomfortable, but safety came first, especially with an unknown species. When the crystalline beings entered through the airlock, the temperature in the quarantine bay dropped sharply. Frost formed on the inner walls, creating beautiful patterns that spread like growing vines. The beings moved with incredible grace, their feet barely touching the floor. One of them stepped forward. Unlike the others, this one had swirling patterns inside its crystal body that reminded Lisa of northern lights. "I am Nixis," it said, its voice sounding like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "We are the Frost Walkers, and we bring greetings from the distant stars." Lisa was amazed that they could speak English. She hadn't expected communication to be so easy. "I'm Dr. Lisa Moore," she said through her suit's speaker. "Welcome aboard the Stellar Pioneer." Nixis tilted its head, studying Lisa with eyes that looked like diamonds. "Your vessel caught our attention. We have not encountered your species before. You are different from the others we have met." The way Nixis said different made Lisa's skin prickle, despite her protective suit. She pushed the feeling aside, focusing instead on the readings her instruments were taking. The Frost Walker's body temperature was well below freezing, and their crystal structure seemed to be constantly changing at the molecular level. "We would be honored to learn more about your species," Lisa said, following diplomatic protocol. "And to share information about ourselves as well." "Yes," Nixis said, moving closer to the observation window where several crew members stood watching. "We are very interested in learning about you all." As Lisa began her initial scans, she noticed something odd. The other Frostwalkers had spread out around the quarantine bay, each one standing near a different monitoring station. They seemed particularly interested in the non-human crew members, the Centaurian navigator, and the 2 Martian security officers who were observing from their posts. "Your crew is quite diverse," Nixis commented, its crystalline fingers touching the window. The layer of frost immediately formed where it made contact. So many different species working together. How fascinating. Lisa made a note about the freezing effect in her datapad, but something in Nixis's tone made her pause. There was an edge to its voice that hadn't been there before, something almost hungry. But before she could think more about it, Nixis turned back to her with its ethereal grace. "Shall we begin our cultural exchange, Dr. Moore? We have so much to share with you all." Looking at Nixis's beautiful crystalline form, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something important. But she was a scientist, and the opportunity to study such an extraordinary species was too valuable to pass up. She just hoped her instincts were wrong about the strange gleam in Nix's diamond eyes. Peter Wright knew something was wrong when he saw the first ice crystals on Sam's hand. Sam, one of the Martian security officers, had accidentally brushed against a frostwalker during their tour of the ship's engineering section. At first, it seemed like nothing, just a small, glittering patch on his red-tinted skin. "You should get that checked out," Peter said, pointing to Sam's hand. Sam looked down and shrugged. "It's probably nothing, just some frost from their cold bodies." But 3 hours later, Sam was in the medical bay, his entire arm covered in spreading crystal patterns. Dr. Amy Collins, the ship's medical officer, had never seen anything like it. "The crystallization is moving through his tissue," she told Peter and Lisa, who stood watching through the isolation window. "It's not just surface frost, it's changing his cells." Inside the medical bay, Sam lay on the bed, his normally red Martian skin now pale and sparkling. The crystals had spread past his shoulder and were creeping across his chest. His breathing was getting slower with each passing minute. "Temperature dropping," the medical computer announced. "Patient core temperature now at -15 degrees Celsius." Lisa pressed her hands against the window, her mind racing. "This isn't a disease," she said. "It's a transformation. The frostwalkers aren't just ice-like, they're converting other beings into their form." Peter checked his tablet, scrolling through engineering reports. "We've got more cases. Both Centaurian navigator Joe and Martian officer Rick showed similar symptoms after contact with the visitors." Dr. Collins looked up from her instruments, her face pale. "That's not all. The crystallization process, it's spreading faster in non-human crew members. Their body temperatures are dropping at twice the rate of the human crew who were exposed." Lisa turned to Peter. "We need to find out why. Run a comparison of affected crew members. Look for any patterns." Peter worked quickly at his station, pulling up medical data. "Got something. The crystallization is slowest in humans. Our higher body temperature seems to be fighting it off, or at least slowing it down." Through the window, they watched as Sam's entire chest became transparent, ice-like crystals replacing flesh and bone. His eyes, now looking like polished diamonds, turned toward them. "Cold," he whispered, his voice sounding like crackling ice. "So beautifully cold." The ship's intercom crackled to life. "Dr. Moore to the bridge immediately. The frostwalkers are requesting a ship-wide gathering." Lisa looked at Peter. "Don't let anyone else near them. I need to talk to the captain." As she hurried to the bridge, Lisa passed more crew members showing signs of crystallization. The non-human crew were transforming faster, their bodies becoming clear as glass. The few affected humans showed only small patches of ice, their bodies somehow resisting the complete change. On the bridge, Nix's stood next to Captain Rogers, its crystal body pulsing with swirling lights. "Dr. Moore," it said, its voice like tinkling icicles, "your crew is beginning to understand our gift." "Gift?" Lisa's voice shook with anger. "You're transforming our people without consent." Nixis moved closer, its presence making the air temperature plummet. "We bring perfection, unity, yet your human bodies resist us. How fascinating." The captain stepped forward, frost crackling under his boots. "This ends now. You'll leave my ship immediately." "Too late," Nixis said, its diamond eyes gleaming. "The process has begun. Soon, most of your crew will join our collective consciousness. Though you humans," it paused, studying Lisa with its crystalline gaze, "you present an interesting challenge. One we look forward to solving." Lisa backed away, her mind working furiously. The frostwalkers weren't visitors. They were invaders. And somehow, human biology was the only thing standing in their way. She had to figure out why before the rest of the crew turned to ice. The temperature on the bridge kept dropping, and in the distance, she could hear the screams of more crew members beginning their transformation. Time was running out. The medical bay had turned into a crystal garden. Where there were once beds with patients, now there stood gleaming statues of ice. Every non-human crew member who had touched the frost walkers was changing rapidly. Their bodies had become clear as glass, with swirling patterns of frost inside them. Lisa watched through the safety glass as Dr. Collins checked on the transformed crew. The doctor wore their thickest environmental suit, but even that didn't stop the chill completely. The Centaurians went first, Dr. Collins said through her suit's speaker. Their naturally lower body temperature made them easy targets. The Martians followed soon after. Peter rushed into the observation room, his breath making clouds in the increasingly cold air. We've lost contact with decks 3 and 4. The transformed crew members are spreading the crystallization by touch. They're working with the frost walkers now. Lisa pulled up the ship's internal cameras on the main screen. The sight made her stomach turn. The transformed crew moved through the halls like living ice sculptures, touching every non-human they could find. Each touch spread the freezing plague further. Look at their movement patterns, Lisa said, pointing to the screen. They're not random. They're hunting down specific crew members. On the screen, 3 crystallized forms cornered a Venusian engineer. His naturally high body temperature made him fight the transformation longer than the others. But in the end, he too began to freeze. We need to understand what's happening to them after they change, Lisa said. She turned to Dr. Collins. What are your readings showing? Their minds are still active, Dr. Collins replied, checking her instruments. But they're different. It's like they're all connected now, sharing one consciousness. And that consciousness belongs to the Frostwalkers. A loud bang made them all jump. Through the observation window, they saw Sam, or what used to be Sam, standing up from his bed. His crystalline form glowed with an inner light, and his movements were smooth and inhuman. Join us, he said, but his voice wasn't his anymore. It had the same chiming quality as the Frostwalkers. Become perfect. Become eternal. The temperature controls aren't working anymore, Peter said, frantically typing at his console. They're spreading through the ship's systems too, freezing everything they touch. The ship's lights flickered, and emergency alarms began to sound. Lisa could see ice spreading across the walls and floor, creating beautiful but terrifying patterns. The human crew members who were touched, Lisa said suddenly. Show me their readings again. Dr. Collins pulled up the data. The few humans who had been touched by the Frostwalkers showed signs of frostbite and tissue damage, but their bodies weren't transforming completely. Our core temperature, Lisa said, her eyes widening with understanding. Humans maintained a higher body temperature than most species, and look at these protein markers in our blood. They're fighting back against the crystallization. Another bang made them turn. Sam was hitting the safety glass, each blow leaving spreads of frost. The glass began to crack. We need to move, Peter said. Now. They ran from the medical bay just as the glass shattered. Behind them, they could hear the crystalline chiming of transformed crew members pursuing them. The sound echoed through the frozen corridors like bells in a winter wind. Head for the engine room, Lisa shouted as they ran. The heat from the fusion core might give us some protection. As they rushed through the ship's corridors, they passed more crew members in various stages of transformation. The non-humans were now almost all crystalline beings, their bodies glowing with the same inner light as the Frostwalkers. Only the human crew members showed partial resistance, their transformations incomplete. In the distance, they could hear Nixus's voice over the ship's speakers. Your resistance is fascinating, humans, but even you cannot resist perfection forever. The cold will take you all in time. Lisa's mind raced as they ran. Their human biology was the key to fighting this invasion. Now they just had to figure out how to use it before the entire ship turned into an alien ice kingdom. The engine room hummed with energy, its fusion core casting an orange glow through the frost-covered windows. Lisa, Peter, and Dr. Collins huddled near the warmth, watching ice crystals spread across the floor toward them, only to melt as they got closer to the heat. The core temperature is keeping them back, Peter said, checking the readings on his tablet. But we can't stay here forever. The ship's other systems are freezing up. Lisa pulled up her own data, reviewing the medical scans they'd taken. "Look at this," she said, pointing to the screen. "When the crystallization hits human tissue, it creates a unique reaction. Our blood proteins actually fight back." Dr. Collins moved closer to see. The human body's natural defense mechanisms are treating it like an invasion, and our higher body temperature makes the crystal structures unstable. A loud bang echoed through the engine room. Through the frosted windows, they could see transformed crew members gathering outside. Their crystal bodies glowed with an eerie blue light, and their movements were perfectly synchronized. "Join us in the cold," they said in unison, their voices creating a haunting chorus. "Let us make you perfect." Peter grabbed a piece of equipment from a nearby workbench. "I think I can modify this environmental regulator. If human body temperature disrupts their crystalline structure, maybe we can use that." "How?" Lisa asked, watching as more ice beings joined the group outside. "We can create a field that mimics human body heat," Peter explained, working quickly with his tools. "Like a weapon that projects warmth instead of energy." The windows were starting to crack under the pressure of the cold. Lisa could see Nixis floating among the transformed crew, its body pulsing with bright patterns. "Keep working," Lisa told Peter. "Dr. Collins, help me gather anything we can use to defend ourselves. We need to buy him time." They found emergency flares and heating packs in the safety lockers. Dr. Collins distributed them, her hands shaking slightly. "The transformed crew, they're still in there somewhere. I can see it in their movements, little gestures that belong to the people we knew. We'll find a way to help them," Lisa promised, though she wasn't sure how. She studied the transformed crew through the frosting glass. Their bodies were perfect crystals now, but their faces still held traces of their original features, frozen in expressions of peaceful acceptance. Another crack appeared in the windows. The temperature in the engine room was dropping despite the fusion core's heat. "Got it." Peter held up his modified device. "It's crude, but it should work. It'll project a field of heat energy that matches human body temperature." Just then, the windows shattered. Crystalline figures poured into the room, their bodies spreading frost wherever they stepped. Nixis floated in behind them, its diamond eyes fixed on the three humans. "Such determination," Nixis said, its voice like ice crystals chiming. "Your species continues to surprise us, but you cannot resist evolution." Peter raised his device and activated it. A wave of warmth spread out from it, pushing back the cold. The transformed crew members stepped back, their crystal bodies crackling with stress. "It's working," Lisa shouted. "The heat is disrupting their structure." But Nixis moved forward, seemingly unaffected. "Clever, but not enough. We have converted countless species across the stars. Humans are just another challenge to overcome." The device in Peter's hands began to spark and smoke. "It's overloading. The power draw is too much." Lisa looked around desperately. They were surrounded by transformed crew members, held back only by the failing device and the engine core's heat. But something about Nix's words caught her attention. "Wait," she said, her mind racing. "They'd done this before, to other species, but they've never met humans until now." She turned to Dr. Collins. "We need to get to the genetics lab. I have an idea." As Peter's device finally gave out with a shower of sparks, they ran for the emergency exit, using their flares to keep the crystal beings at bay. Behind them, Nix's laughter echoed like breaking ice, but Lisa held on to her realization. Humans weren't just resisting by accident. There was something in their biology that could be the key to stopping the Frostwalkers completely. The genetics lab was cold when they arrived, but not yet frozen. Lisa's hands shook as she powered up the analysis equipment. Ice crystals were already forming on the edges of the room, creeping inward like slow-moving fingers. "We don't have much time," Dr. Collins said, watching the door. "What are you looking for?" Lisa pulled up the scans they had taken of the Frostwalkers during first contact. "Look at their crystal structure. It's not random. It's a pattern, like a giant nervous system. Peter kept watch at the other door, holding their last working flare. What does that mean? They're not individuals, Lisa said, her eyes wide with understanding. They're all connected, a hive mind. Each crystallized being becomes part of their network. She pointed to the complex patterns within Nixus's body that they had recorded earlier. These aren't just pretty lights. They're signals. Dr. Collins moved closer to the screen. Like a living computer network. Exactly, Lisa said. She pulled up new images showing the partially crystallized human crew members. See how the patterns in humans are broken and unclear. Our bodies aren't just fighting the transformation. We're disrupting their network. The ship's speakers crackled to life. Nix's voice filled the room. But now it wasn't just one voice. It was many voices speaking together. Your understanding grows, but it changes nothing. We are the next step in evolution. We bring unity, perfect communication, perfect harmony. That's why they target ships and colonies, Peter said, realization dawning on his face. They're not just attacking. They're recruiting, building their network. Lisa nodded, typing quickly at her workstation. And they've been doing it for a long time. Look at these readings from their crystal structure. There are patterns within patterns, layers of different species they've absorbed. The temperature in the lab dropped suddenly. Frost spread across the screens, nearly obscuring the data. Through the lab windows, they could see transformed crew members approaching, their bodies glowing brighter than before. But why can't they fully transform humans? Dr. Collins asked, her breath visible in the cold air. Lisa pulled up more data. It's not just our body temperature, it's our whole biology. Humans are messy, according to their standards. Our cells are constantly changing, dying, being replaced. Our thoughts aren't ordered or logical. We're too chaotic for their perfect system. Our imperfection is our strength, Peter said quietly. The lab doors began to freeze over. Outside, the transformed crew pressed their crystal hands against the windows, leaving trails of ice. There's more, Lisa said, her voice urgent. The Frostwalkers aren't just adding to their network. They need to. They can't survive without constantly expanding. Each new transformation makes their network stronger, more stable. And humans threaten that stability, Dr. Collins added, understanding. We're like a virus to their system. The windows began to crack. Lisa quickly transferred the data to her tablet. Now we know why they're so interested in us. We're not just resistant, we're dangerous to them. If they can't solve the human problem, we could be a threat to their entire network. Peter raised his flare as ice crystals began breaking through the doors. That's great, but how does it help us right now? Lisa grabbed some equipment from the lab bench. Because now we know their weakness. They need perfection. Order. Their network can't handle chaos. She held up a small device, and I think I know how to use that against them. The windows shattered, letting in a wave of frozen air. The transformed crew entered like a wave of living ice, with Nixus floating above them. But now Lisa could see what she couldn't before. The fear behind their perfect crystalline faces. You understand now, Nixus said, its many voices tinged with something new. Worry. Then you know why we cannot allow humans to exist outside our control. Lisa held her ground, clutching her tablet and the device. No, she said. Now we know how to stop you. Peter watched as Lisa connected her device to the ship's environmental control system. They had fought their way to the main control room, using the last of their flares to hold back the crystal beings. Dr. Collins stood guard at the door, holding a makeshift torch made from equipment they'd grabbed from the genetics lab. What exactly are we doing? Peter asked, helping Lisa connect power cables. We're going to give them what they hate most, Lisa said, her fingers moving quickly over the controls. Chaos. Unpredictability. Everything that makes humans human. The device she had taken from the genetics lab was a cellular stimulator, normally used to study how living tissue reacted to different conditions. But Lisa had modified it. Our bodies are always changing, she explained. Our temperature goes up and down. Our cells die and regrow. We're constantly in flux. The Frostwalkers can't handle that. They need perfect order. Dr. Collins called from the door. They're coming. All of them. Through the control room windows, they could see an army of crystal beings approaching. Former crew members moved in perfect unison, their bodies glowing with shared consciousness. Nyx's floated at their center, its form pulsing with bright patterns. The stimulator is connected to the ship's systems, Lisa said. When I activate it, it will create a field of biological energy, like projecting human body rhythms throughout the ship. What will that do to them? Peter asked, watching the approaching crystal army. Their network depends on perfect harmony. This should disrupt that harmony. Lisa looked at her companions. But I don't know what it will do to us. Our bodies might react to the field too. The temperature dropped as the crystal beings drew closer. Frost covered the windows, creating strange patterns that shifted and moved. We're out of options, Dr. Collins said, backing away from the door as ice began to form around it. Do it. Lisa activated the device. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then Peter felt it, a strange tingling throughout his body, like every cell was dancing. The effect on the crystal beings was immediate. Their perfect, synchronized movements began to falter. The glowing patterns within their bodies became erratic. It's working, Peter said. The field is disrupting their network. Nyx's voice came through the speakers, but now it sounded broken, discordant. What are you doing to us? The harmony, breaking. The transformed crew members began to move independently, their crystalline forms flickering with chaotic lights. Some stumbled, others reached out as if confused. The network can't maintain control, Lisa said, watching the readings on her screen. Human biological patterns are too random, too unpredictable. Their perfect system can't cope. Through the frosted windows, they watched as the crystal beings began to separate from each other. The beautiful but terrifying unity that had made them so dangerous was falling apart. But then something unexpected happened. The partially transformed humans among them began to move with new purpose. Their bodies, which had been caught between flesh and crystal, seemed to be changing again. Look! Dr. Collins pointed to one of the crew members. The crystals. They're breaking down. The human crew member's natural biology was reasserting itself, helped by the chaotic energy field. The crystallization that had started to claim them was reversing. Nyx's floated closer to the control room window, its perfect form now showing cracks. You cannot destroy us. We are perfection. No, Lisa said, standing firm. Your stagnation. Life isn't about perfection. It's about adaptation, change, even chaos. That's what makes us strong. The crystal beings were retreating now, their network failing under the assault of human biological rhythms. But Lisa knew this was just the beginning. They had found a way to fight back, but the real battle was still to come. The battle for the Stellar Pioneer entered its final phase. Lisa, Peter, and Dr. Collins watched from the control room as their modified energy field continued to spread through the ship. The beautiful but deadly crystal network of the Frostwalkers was breaking down, unable to handle the chaos of human biological patterns. The non-human crew members, Dr. Collins said, checking her medical readings. They're still fully crystallized. The field isn't changing them back. Lisa nodded sadly. Their transformation was complete. They became part of the Frostwalker network entirely. She looked at the readings on her screen. But the human crew members are returning to normal. Their bodies are breaking down the crystals. Through the frosted windows, they could see Nyx's struggling to maintain control of its fragmenting network. Its once perfect crystalline form showed deep cracks, and the beautiful patterns within its body had become jerky and random. Your disorder spreads like a disease, Nyx's said, its multiple voices now out of sync. Centuries of perfection falling to chaos. Peter checked the ship's systems. Temperature is rising in all sections. The ice is melting. But we're getting warning signals from the transformed non-human crew members. Their crystal forms are becoming unstable. They can't survive without the network, Lisa realized. Quick, seal off the cargo bay. We need to get all the transformed crew there before their forms collapse completely. Working together, they used the ship's systems to herd the crystal beings into the cargo bay. The humans who had been partially transformed were already returning to normal, their bodies naturally fighting off the remaining crystals. In the cargo bay, Nixus made one last attempt to save its network. "We could have made you perfect," it said, its form barely holding together. "Given you eternal life in crystal." "That's not life," Lisa replied through the intercom. "Life is messy. It's complex. It changes and grows. What you offer is just beautiful stagnation." The crystal beings gathered around Nixus, their forms flickering like dying lights. The non-human crew members, still trapped in crystal form, moved jerkily as the network continued to fail. "Dr. Collins," Lisa said suddenly. "The stasis pods. Could they preserve the crystallized crew members until we find a way to help them?" "Yes." Dr. Collins rushed to the controls. "The pods can maintain their current state without letting the crystallization progress or collapse." They worked quickly, using remote systems to move their transformed friends into stasis pods. Each pod would keep its occupant in perfect suspension, giving them time to find a cure. "You haven't won," Nixus said, its voice fading. "We are eternal. We will return." "And we'll be ready," Peter replied. "Humanity isn't just going to sit back and let you harvest the galaxy." As the last of the transformed crew were secured in stasis pods, Nixus and the original Frostwalkers began to break apart. Their perfect crystal bodies couldn't maintain their form without the stable network. In their last moments, their bodies released a burst of energy that lit up the cargo bay like a winter sunrise. Then they were gone, leaving behind only a fine dusting of ice crystals that quickly melted in the warming air. Lisa looked at the medical readings from the recovering human crew members. Already their bodies were adapting, developing new defenses against crystallization. Evolution in action, messy and unpredictable, but effective. "Send a message to Earth," she told Peter. "They need to know about the Frostwalkers, about how to fight them." And she looked at the stasis pods holding their transformed friends, about how to help their victims. Dr. Collins placed a hand on the window of the nearest stasis pod. Inside, their Martian security officer floated in perfect crystal suspension. "We'll find a way to bring them back," she promised. The ship's systems were returning to normal, ice melting from the walls and windows. But Lisa knew this was just the beginning. The Frostwalkers would return, seeking to perfect the galaxy in their image. But now humanity knew the truth. Their greatest weakness, their disorder and chaos and constant change, was actually their greatest strength. And next time, they would be ready.